Susan was 18 years old when she was riding down the street in her bicycle. Out of nowhere, a truck came along and hit her while she was on the bicycle, sent her flying through the air. She survived the accident, but the way she landed, she hit her head. There was trauma, there was head trauma that took place. And after further investigation, it was found that she had brain damage. Now, what that meant, and she began to realize this in the following days and weeks, was the part of her brain that was affected was the part of our brain that can read. It can discern symbols on a page and work out what those symbols mean to us. Now, she could still read basic stuff, like basic words and phrases she could get. But as far as sitting down to try to read a book or a novel or a textbook, something like that, it just would prove to be too difficult for her to do. Now, this was quite unfortunate for Susan because she had just graduated high school, very intelligent young woman, had many scholarships lined up for her to go to college and continue her education. And now those dreams were dashed, and she really didn't know what she was going to do with herself. So, not really having any other options, she found what work she could, just kind of made a meager living for herself, always kind of wishing that she could go back to college. She had this hunger, this thirst for knowledge. She was a very intelligent young woman and still desired to learn, but now that had been denied her. Now, a friend of hers recommended that she start attending night classes, going to the local community college, just sitting in on courses just to learn. And Susan was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. I can't really read, so it really wouldn't do me any good. And the friend's like, you don't have to read. You don't have to bring a book. Just go and listen to what these professors have to say. Just enjoy and soak up the knowledge that they have to offer. Well, not knowing anything better to do, Susan agreed to this. And so she went to the community college, not really with any class in mind, didn't really have an agenda of what she wanted to learn. She was just going to go in the first door that she saw and see what class was being offered. And so it was kind of divine providence. She walked into this door, and she realized immediately it wasn't your typical class. She walked in, and at the front of the classroom was the professor. Instead of writing things on the board or speaking, he was just making signs in the air. He was painting pictures with his fingers in the air. And Susan watched, mesmerized by this, as she kind of saw these pictures appear in the air and then disappear as soon as he ended. What she found was that the part of her brain that now was damaged and couldn't read had kind of been repurposed, and things that were visual were way more clear to her. She could almost intuit the sign language that this man was using. It was just very natural for her. She could kind of just grasp the meaning of these things. And so she sat down and was just enthralled by this. And over the next weeks and months, she very quickly became fluent with sign language and had found her calling, that she was meant to be a teacher, an instructor, an interpreter with sign language. And so she did. She found herself a position in this classroom of the deaf, these people who had been born unable to hear and needed that extra help. Now, she preferred working with adults, those who had gone through life and never really learned sign language. She found it very rewarding to help them to understand how to communicate, how to be a part of this bigger world that we're all a part of. And so as she was teaching one semester, she looked at the back of the class and she noticed there was a student, a young man about 27 years old, that was not participating as the rest of the class was. She would hold up an image and she'd do the sign for it, and everyone would sign back, and it was very clear, what lesson was being taught, what was happening. But this young man in the back just had his arms folded, leaning back in his chair, and had nothing to do with any of this. So Susan took it upon herself to kind of make him her special project. She was going to make sure that he learned something while he was attending these classes. So one day after class, she went up to him and she signed to him, "Hello, my name is Susan." And this young man, looked at her intently and signed right back and said, "Hello, my name is Susan." She was like, No, my name is Susan. What's your name?" And he responded right back, No, my name is Susan. What's your name?" Now, at first, she was very frustrated by this, and she was like, oh, okay, here we go. This is the class clown. He's sitting in the back, he's not participating, and now he's mocking me, and I'm just going to repeat whatever I do. But that wasn't the case. She realized that this young man was different from all the other students. Not that he wasn't intelligent, he was a very intelligent young man, but she began to realize that this guy, being born deaf, didn't know that there were such things as words. He had no concept of language, that things had names. So she would take a book, right? She'd show him the book, and she'd make the sign for book, which is this. This is a sign for book in sign language. And in his mind, there were no words, there were no titles for things. He just assumed that she was trying to get his attention to go get her a book. So he'd run to the bookcase, he'd grab a book and bring it to her, not realizing that had a name, that meant something. And she tried to do that with the door, and he just wasn't getting it. He was very frustrated with what she was wanting from him. And so they would work on it day in and day out, trying to get this man to see that the world was full of symbolism and meaning that he just didn't get. In fact, he went around not even realizing that there was such a thing as sound. That just didn't even dawn on his imaginings that there was a way to communicate via audio, right? So when he would look around and people would talk, and he'd see their lips moving, he just assumed that there was some hidden message there that he just couldn't interpret. He thought he was just an idiot. He thought he was just the stupidest man on earth, and he wasn't grasping what it seemed like everybody else was able to do. He'd read people's lips, but he had no idea that meant something. And so day in and day out, she'd work with him, and she'd point to objects, and she'd make the sign, and he just was not getting it. Finally, Susan came to the conclusion that what she needed to do was to just ignore him. And what she would do is she would show up at class, and she'd sit down in a chair, and she'd put another chair in front of her, an empty chair, as if there was an imaginary student, an invisible student in that chair. And she would bring like a cat, she'd start petting the cat, she'd make the sign for cat, and then she'd put the cat down, she'd stand up, she'd walk around to the other chair, she'd sit down in that chair, and then she would act like the student, and she'd go, cat, yes, and she'd make the sign for cat, and then she would do this for other objects, acting as the teacher and the student. Now, this young man watched all this, and she was just like, this woman has gone crazy. He couldn't understand what she was trying to relate to him. For weeks she did this, trusting that maybe, somehow, it was going to break through. And then one day it did. One day he sat there watching her play these two roles, and his eyes got real wide, and he realized what was happening. And he ran to the bookcase, he grabbed a book off the shelf, and he pointed to it. And she made the sign for book, and then he made it back and pointed to the object. Then he ran to the door, and he grabbed the door, and the same thing. And he pointed to the desk and the table, the chalkboard, everything in the room. He was like, they have names. There's a whole world that exists that I didn't even realize was there. And it was overwhelming. He couldn't believe it, that these symbols, that's how people communicate. He wasn't alone anymore. He could actually talk to other people. And then he pointed at himself. And Susan realized that in all these weeks, she had never learned his name. So she just kind of had to shrug her shoulders. But he knew that he had one. And he wept. He broke down and cried. This new world crashed upon him because he thought he knew how the world worked. And now there was so much more. So much beyond his imaginings. That feeling, that sense, I have to read that into today's gospel on many levels. At one level, it's very clear. We have this man that's born blind. This man that would have grown up, and people would have talked about blue and green, and he would have had no clue what they were talking about. Light and dark, these would have been foreign concepts to him. He knew they existed, but it was a whole world he couldn't even engage in. It was beyond him. Until that day when this random stranger showed up and smeared mud on his face and told him to go wash in the pool of Siloam, and he did. And now he could see. Now that world was accessible to him. He belonged. He understood what he couldn't possibly understand before. Now that goes a little deeper here. Because if that exists for these individuals that are lacking in a sense awareness, is it so impossible, is it so difficult for us to think that maybe, just maybe what Christ is doing in today's gospel is he's trying to teach them that even for us, who have all of our faculties, all of our senses, maybe even for us, there is another world that exists that we are unaware of, that maybe there's something out there that is beyond us that is so difficult for us to grasp. That maybe there's a God that loves us so much that we can't even begin to comprehend that language, that word. And so the real people that are at disadvantage here, it's not the blind man, he's not the disabled one, it's the Pharisees. Right? Because Christ, he's trying to give them this, right? He does this miracle, he has this sign, and the blind man is brought before the Pharisees, and they just can't believe it. They're stuck in their worldview. They're stuck in their little world that they exist, and they can't even believe that there's something more out there. And so what do? They interview the blind man, and they're just like, how is it that you can see? And he's just like, I don't know. This random guy showed up, speared mud on my face, and now I can see. And they're just like, well, that can't be. And so they deny it. And they're just like, well, this guy's faking it. He wasn't blind to begin with. So they bring in his parents, and they interview the parents. And they're just like, is this your son? And they're like, yes, yep, that's our son. You know, all right, yep, he's the one. Was he born blind? Yes. Yes, he was. They still don't believe it. So what do? They bring him back in for a second interview. And they're just like, tell us, once again, how it is that you were blind and now you can see. And he's like, I've already told you. I've already explained it to you and you won't listen. There's a man out there, I'm telling you, that can do things that no other man can do. But the Pharisees are just deaf to it all. They're blind to it. They don't want to accept that there's another reality out there. What Christ came to teach us was that our puny little minds can't even begin to grasp the magnitude of God's love for us. And He's trying so desperately to show us that. And for us, it's going to take time. It's going to take weeks and years of us being shown that once again, time and time again. And then maybe, just maybe, one day we'll have that aha moment. Our eyes will grow wide and we'll, at least at some level, grasp this whole other world, this whole other language that exists for us. But the only way that's even possible is if we do not fall into the trap of the Pharisees. We do not lock ourselves into this world's view. We do not think that this is it. But instead, like the blind man, we have hope. We're open to those possibilities, those other dimensions of God that are beyond us right now. And then the day will come, and that question will be asked of us, do you believe in the Son of Man? And if we've been open and we've been searching for it, we've been longing for it and desiring it, then on that day we will say, yes, yes, I do believe. And our eyes will be opened. Our ears will be opened. And we'll see something so beautiful. And even then, it will not be the fullness of it, but only a glimmer, a piece of a much larger whole. Now for us that's difficult. But in that calling, we, like the blind man, may finally get to see Christ for who He really is.